Well, good morning, everyone. There we go. How are we doing? Good. After a title package like that says hurt, I'm glad to hear you're good, because I don't know how this lands with everybody. I don't know when you see hurt. I don't know what that brings up in all of our hearts, because depending on your background, depending on your current situation, if you're in the middle of something that this just defines it so well, that could bring up some emotions. Or if you're like, and I don't want to just make up a statistic on the spot, but if you're like most Americans, when you talk about hurt, the first reaction, the first thought is probably to go, why do we have to go there? I don't want to go there. This is why we have football and baseball and hockey. This is why we have Netflix. This is why we have gaming. This is why we have the entertainment world, because I don't want to talk about this. Because when I talk about this, it makes it all weird and awkward and oogie and touchy-feely, and life is just life. You get on with life, do life, move on, do your thing. So I don't know where it lands with you, and depending on your situation currently, this may be an incredibly emotional thing, or it may be an irritating thing. And why should we focus on that for a few weeks at church? Why? I want to go to church to be inspired. I want to go in church to be happy, and tell me about prayer, and tell me about how life can be good, and tell me all that stuff. But here's why. Here's why we're doing this. Because I really think if we don't talk about this, then we're going to distract ourselves into pretend happiness, and we're going to distract ourselves into, yay, this is awesome and inspiration, all the while something is underneath the surface that may never change and may never help and may never be different, and then we'll need distractions for the rest of our lives to be able to find the happiness that we think we may have, because America is so good at that. We're so good at distracting. We're so good at that. So why are we doing a few talks on the word hurt? Why do we throw that up there? Why do we go there? Simply put, the reason we want to talk about this is because all of us get hurt. Every single one of us, some really big, some we think is insignificant and smaller, but the reality is all of us get hurt, and hurt changes who we are. And we could go and talk about hurt in a million different ways, but the way that I would like to talk about it, the way that I'd like to look at this, the way that I'd like to tackle this subject is this idea that all of us are going to get hurt, all of us have been hurt, and I'll kind of break that down a little more to get us on the same page, but not just are we hurt, and some of us massive, and you look at people like that and you go, oh, my heart breaks for you. But the reality is all of us get hurt to some degree or another. All of us do. And the tack that I want to take, the direction I want to look at this, the perspective I want to look at this with, is the fact that that hurt that we get changes who we are and how that looks. So we're going to talk about that for a few minutes now as we set up the series and kind of jump into this whole idea of hurt. To get us on the same page, this is not new information, all of us would probably agree with this, but to get us on the same page, I want to talk about this, all of us get hurt. All of us get hurt for a bit, because there's a bunch of different kinds of hurt that we feel. And this hurt, can be, like I said, massive, it can be small, it can seemingly be insignificant, but I would like to kind of offer this opinion that no hurt is insignificant if we aren't careful. No hurt is insignificant if we are not careful. So what kind of hurt is there? What kind of hurt do you feel in the past, in the present, and what's happening almost on a daily basis, weekly basis as we head into the future? There's a bunch of different kinds of hurt. The first one is relational hurt. And this is probably the biggest because we live in a world filled with people, people who are imperfect, people who are human, people who hurt each other. And you're one of them, and I'm one of them, because I bring hurt to others. I don't want to. I don't try to. I do it unintentionally sometimes intentionally, and that's kind of the reality of humans. We do that, but there's relational hurt. And this starts way back in your family of origin and my family of origin, and this is some of the most impactful stuff in who you are, because this molds us, this develops us. All of us get hurt, and that hurt changes us. This is one of the biggest things that has molded you into who you are today, whether that is who you wanted to be or not. Family of origin stuff happens all the time, and that is even if you had a great family, because your great family was made up of imperfect people. My family was made up of imperfect people, and our family of origin In that place, even if they were great parents, even if you love your dad, you love your mom, amazing people, they're human. And so they don't fulfill all their promises. They don't fulfill all your expectations and my expectations that may have gone unsaid, and yet they were very, very real. We may not even have known what they were. We may not even have known what we needed, but we desperately needed it. And when those things happen, it hurts. All of us have experienced hurt. And then you kind of grow up and you start venturing into not just family, but friends and work. And in friendships and work, you open yourself up to a whole new world of wonder and a whole new world of joy and a whole new world of amazing friendships and a whole new world of hurt. And the reality is, it's not just when you're a kid that friendships can hurt, but it's when you're a big kid, when you're an adult. I used to think one day I'm going to be mature. One day I'm going to be older. One day I'm going to be strong. And the reality is, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, no matter whether you're a guy or a girl, no matter if you're married or single, no matter if you're old or young, the reality is we get hurt. And if you get misunderstood, if you get overlooked, if you get forgotten, if you get rejected, if you're not picked, if you get ridiculed, it hurts every single time. And we kind of have ways to get over it, and we have our guards, and we have our facades, and we have our way that we respond, and we have our words that we throw out. But the reality is, if you look beyond the words, look beyond the fake, the facades, look beyond the mask, look beyond all that stuff, inside there is a twang, there is a pain, there is a hurt. Every single time. And then after friendships and work, many of us, most of us, get into that relationship that is the most intimate, the most intense, the deepest relationship, marriage. And as wonderful and as great as marriage is, if you've been married any length of time, you know that one of the parts of marriage is hurt. All of us get hurt because now you've taken two imperfect people and you've shoved them together. Get on, make this work, you can do this. And we've shoved it together, and here we the worst of us comes out when we feel like this is consistent. The worst of us comes out with the ones we love the most sometimes, and in that happening, in that space, I hurt my spouse, you hurt your spouse. In that time, it happens. But hurt happens relationally all the time. And then we're not even talking about, those are just the normal life hurts. And that lands in us. We all feel that. But then we get to some of the bigger things and the things that many of us have experienced. But it hurts. Things like abandonment, divorce, betrayal. When that happens, it's painful. It hurts. And we look at those and we go, sometimes it's massive, sometimes it's way worse than other times, but most of us experience some sort of abandonment, some sort of betrayal at some point in our life. And that hurts. All of us are hurt, but that's just relational hurt. Then we move on to what I'm calling situational hurt. Because life, this world is broken too. I mean, this world's a mess, and sometimes there's things in our lives that just happen, and we wish it wouldn't, and we couldn't control it, and we couldn't do anything about it, but situational hurt, life slaps you in the face, and this happens to all of us to some degree or another. Some people feel it way worse than others, but all of us experience some sort of situational pain, situational hurt in life. Things like, and this is not an exhaustive list because I don't know the complexity of your story. I don't even know the complexity of mine, but the reality is all of us experience something like job loss, financial distress, health issues. We will all experience that one day, all of us. Loss of a loved one. When things like that happen in life, it's just painful. All of us experience hurt, relational hurt, situational hurt. And then there's one that we don't think about, because usually when we get hurt, we point fingers and blame other people, and we don't like it when people hurt us. But I think one of the most powerful, one of the most in-depth, one of the most impactful hurts that we experience is personal hurt. And this is when we do dumb things. And all of us do dumb things at some point. All of us have regrets. All of us go through life and we make decisions about what we're going to do and how we're going to treat people and who we're going to hang out with and who we're going to go there with, what we're going to entertain ourselves with, what we're going to do, how we're going to fill our brains, how we're going to fill our time, all those things. Sometimes we make bad decisions in those moments, and those things hurt us. And we don't want to admit that because we want to stand strong on the decision we've made, and I've decided. But man, if we just take the mask off, if you're lying on your bed at night and you look inside and you go, oh, That hurt. All of us have experienced that to some. And again, I keep saying all of us. I can't presume what you've experienced. But as I've studied, as I've looked at this, as I've experienced it in my own life, and as I've spoken to people, I realized, man, we've all experienced this. And it's not just bad decisions. One of the most hurtful things that we experience, one of the most impactful things in our lives is not just our bad decisions, but it's our poor reactions to other people's actions. When somebody does something and we react in a way that is not consistent with who we want to be, sometimes that's the most powerful, sometimes that's the most hurtful, sometimes that's the most impactful thing in our lives. So there's relational hurt, there's situational hurt, there's personal hurt. And then we get to one that I don't want to just glibly go over it, but I can't hang here for a while because of time. But this is one that is just awful. If I were to describe this one, I would use a Bible term because I don't know if there's a better word to describe this. This next hurt is when somebody's sin just sins all over you. It's abusive hurt. When there's abusive hurt and someone chooses to do something to you or to someone you love, this is awful, and this is so painful, and this is so impactful and so defining for many of us. Whether that's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, these things are massive and they hurt. So the reality is that all of us get hurt. Whether it's relational, situational, personal, abusive hurt, all of us, to some extent or another, have experienced hurt. At work, at home, in relationships, in life, from someone that just, you don't even want to think about it. We've all experienced hurt. And that's why I think REM's song just blew up so much. Great song, amazing musically, but man, it just connected with people. That's why there's over 34 million views on their YouTube video, and it's a 3x4 screen. It's not even modern. I mean, it's this old video, and people just keep watching this video. And that's why, because they said everybody hurts sometimes, and I think everybody, when we're just alone and we can watch a YouTube video, we can feel. When we're with people, we're like, whoa, I'm good, I'm great, distract, I'm great, everything's great. But if we get quiet, we realize there's something in us. Everybody hurts sometimes. All right, now that we've had that emotion out and all the guys are sitting here going, don't really want to talk about this, let's ask again, why? Why spend all this time talking about it? Don't you just move on? I mean, life happens, right? And it happens to all of us. So let's just move on. Forget about that. Go be who you need to be. Figure it out and live life. And if I'm hurt, I'll go speak to a counselor. Why do I have to talk about this at church? And here's why. Here's why we need to talk about this. Because as I've discovered in my own life, that hurt changed me. It changed me. It made me who I am. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories in a minute, but it changed me. As I've looked at my life and as I've kind of journeyed through a counseling journey, I've discovered, oh my gosh, there were so many things, and some things I didn't even know were hurtful at the time, that landed in me and began to change me and began to mold me and began to make me who I didn't want to be. And I realized that every single one of those hurts impacted me. And then when I've spoken to other people, because I'm sure you can imagine as a pastor, sometimes I get invited into people's stories. Not the Sunday story, not the cute story, not the story we portray to everybody else, but our story. And I've heard some stories, and I've looked at those, I'm going, oh my word. That impacts us. Hurt impacts us, whether it's big hurt, small hurt, one-time hurt, extended time hurt, personal hurt, relational hurt, situational hurt, abusive hurt. It impacts us. And then as I've spoken to professionals, as I've spoken to counselors and psychologists, as I've read books and as I've studied this and as I've listened to the study of other people, the reality is that no matter what hurt you face, that hurt falls in our heart and it has the potential to literally change us without us knowing that it's changing us. What is it? Is it like this? I don't know how this illustration, but that frog in the pot just sits there. It's wonderful, and it starts to boil slowly. We don't even know it's happening. And hurt has that potential. And here's why. And I used this illustration earlier in the year in another talk that I did. But hurt is like seeds falling in our heart. And every single hurt you feel, whether it's small or big, relational, abusive, whatever it is, every single hurt you experience is like a seed that falls on your heart. And your heart is the most fertile place in the world. But the crazy thing about seeds, and I don't know why I think this detailed about stuff like this, but I do, go with me. Have you ever taken a seed and looked at it? No, none of us have. If you've ever taken a seed and looked at it, if you didn't know what a seed was, this would look like a little piece of dirt. A little piece of gravel that means nothing, and yet somehow inside that seed is life. The power of this seed producing a plant that will then bear the same fruit as the seed. And if the seed is a seed of hurt, it lands on our heart. If it grows, it has the power to grow more hurt. Have you ever heard the statement, hurt people hurt people? That's just a tiny little illustration of the power of a seed. When a hurt seed lands in our hearts, and it germinates, and it grows, it has the ability to change me so that I become something I don't want to be. Because if I were to ask all of us, who wants to hurt the people around them? Unless you're really mad at someone and you're retaliating, but originally, as you are growing up, who you want to be, who wants to hurt people? None of us would put our hands up. We want to be nice. We want to be good. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. None of us wants to. And yet somehow these seeds produce life, and the kind of life we don't want them to produce. The reality is, the reason we need to talk about hurt is because outside of this, we're going to distract ourselves. Who wants to talk about hurt at home? Hey, hon, let's have dinner. Let's talk about all the hurt. No, we don't want to do that. The reason we need to talk about this is because hurt changes us. It changes you. It changes me. Every single time that hurt has the potential to change us. And here's why. Because your heart and my heart is the most fertile place in the world. And if we're not careful, if we're not just watching, if we're not attentive, those seeds, when they land on our heart, they will just germinate immediately. That's the power of our hearts. It's not like you have to care for those seeds. They just go because our hearts are so fertile when it comes to this. They germinate. They grow. So, why are we talking about hurt? An irritating topic that we pay millions. America pays billions of dollars to not talk about this. The reason we need to talk about this is because all of us get hurt. Every single one of us. Big, small, immediate, personal, relational, long time, short, whatever. All of us get hurt. And that hurt has the potential to change you to become something you don't want to be. So here's the deal. I don't know your story. I don't know your experiences. I don't know what you've gone through. I know there are many stories of hurt sitting in this room right now, many, but I don't know it. And so I'm not going to presume this of you. I believe it's true, but I do know me. I know my story. So I want to tell you just a couple of quick stories about hurt that has changed me. So hurt changes us. So here's the deal. I've been married for about 15 years now, just over 15 years, and it's been great. The first 5 years were tough, and I'll tell you a little bit about that now, and I've expressed that before. I'm trying to figure this thing out because two imperfect people get together, and I had a bunch of stuff in me that I brought into this thing. But 15 years in, the coolest thing is that I like my wife more now than I ever have, and she likes me back. And I love her. I'm inspired by her. I listen to her talk and I go, wow, where do you get that? That's amazing. It makes me better. It's amazing. I really, really like her. And I love being with her, and she tells me, she makes me feel good. That's awesome. She does. It's amazing. And so we're closer than we've ever been. We love each other more than we ever have. It's great. And yet, there are still those moments where we just don't see eye to eye. The reality is Kristen and I are complete opposites in personality type. Myers-Briggs, if you know Myers-Briggs, it's a personality profile. She's an extroverted, intuitive feeler. I'm an introverted, sensing thinker. And so sometimes when she talks, it sounds Russian. It's like, You want me to know what? I don't understand. And sometimes when I talk, it feels different. And so that leads to misunderstandings. That leads to conflict. That leads to times. And there are times where somehow, sometimes mostly accidentally, sometimes not, we hurt each other. And this happens, sometimes more than other times. And then when that happens, the craziest thing happens because I'm in love with her. I love her. We're doing good. It's wonderful. But when I feel hurt by her, you know what happens? I change. This really cool person that I think I am, this person that loves my wife, this person that wants to be kind, wants to create a safe place for her, to talk about whatever's there is, because I know that breeds intimacy and I know that breeds health. This person that wants to love her well, wants to serve her with all that I am. And I could say the same for her. This person that wants to love me and help me and serve me and give to me. And we've just gone through this marriage thing where it's mutual submission. That's who we want to be. And the truth is, if I were to say who you want to be, my guess is you want to be that kind of person too. That you're seen as someone who's loved. You're seen as someone who loves well. You're seen as someone who serves. You're seen as someone who's there for each other. Even though that's who I want to be. When I get hurt, do you know what happens? I say things I don't want to say. Where is that coming from? I do things I don't want to do. I put up a guard. I protect more. I retaliate sometimes. I say things and do things I don't want to do. You know what I do? I get defensive. I prove myself, I prove my points, and I start protecting me, not her. Protecting me, not us. And I become more important than her, and I become more important than us. Why? That's not who I want to be. That's not who I choose to be. And yet, in that moment when hurt happens, even if it is perceived hurt, not real hurt, when hurt happens, I get defensive, I prove, I protect, and I retaliate. And we do that. That's just a picture of how hurt changes who we are. And that's a momentary picture. That happens in the moment. Those seeds, even if it's misunderstanding, miscommunication, or if it's intentional, when she hurts me or when I hurt her, it's like we throw these seeds, and the minute those seeds land in our heart, they begin to germinate, and it changes who I am. And my guess is that's true for all of us. Don't want to presume, don't want to offend you, but my guess is that's true for every single one of us. Even if you're amazing, even if you're awesome, even if you love well, there are moments when hurt comes and it changes us. And here's the danger. Seeds, when they're planted, don't just germinate, they grow. And if we aren't careful, those seeds, even seeds of misunderstanding, even seeds of miscommunication, even seeds of I don't like what you just did there, begin to grow, and they begin to grow bigger and bigger and deeper, and eventually I'm not the same person that I was. And eventually I treat you differently than I want to on a consistent basis. And I don't listen as much because I'm protecting me, and you don't deserve me to listen to you because you've hurt me too many times. And then I begin to treat other people that way too, because you know why? It's changing me. Your hurt has changed me. And there are weeds and vines and thorns beginning to wrap itself around my heart because I'm not watching what's going on in there. Because every hurt, big, small, painful, almost didn't even see it go under the radar. Every hurt is a seed. And it lands in our hearts and begins to grow if we aren't careful. That's how hurt changes us in the small things. But it changes us in the big things as well. And when it changes us, it begins to define who we are. Another story from my life. I don't want to go into detail because a lot of you have heard some of my story. But I grew up in a pretty broken home. There was marriage and divorce and remarriage and divorce and remarriage and divorce and remarriage. It happened so many times. Started off when I was 9, and I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know all this stuff. I didn't know how this is supposed to work, but that hurt. And one of the primary things that hurt, and this is a hurt that landed in my heart, didn't know it did, and it started to grow, and it grabbed a hold of me. And it was the fact that my dad wasn't around when I started going to early adolescence. And so when a boy goes into early adolescence, that's the moment I'm starting to become a man. Whoa, I've got to figure out, what does it take to be a man? I'm not a boy anymore. What does it take to be a man? And I want my dad to tell me you have what it takes to be a man. But he wasn't there. So I never heard that. And I didn't know I needed to hear that, but that was a seed. Hear that, but that was a seed. And it landed in my heart, and it began to grow. And throughout my life, there's been this weed, this thorn, this bramble, that has been this voice going, you don't have what it takes. And insecurity and pain that led me to sit in meetings at work going, should I say this? Should I not say this? I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know if I have what it takes. It affected everything I did, and I brought that into my marriage. Another thing, before I go on, as I've been studying, as I've been reading, as I've met other men, I think I've discovered that there are many, many dads who haven't told their sons, you have what it takes to be a man. And so there are millions and millions of men walking around just like me going, do I? This insecurity, this weed just wrapped around our heart, choking out the ability to be free, the ability to be who God has called us to be what we want to be. It's choking that thing. There are millions of men walking around going, I don't know. But we hide that, and we hide that by showing how strong we are and how successful we are and who we're married to, who we're dating, who we're divorcing and getting remarried to. Substance, whatever it is, and it all comes back to this thing in us that says, I don't know if I have what it takes. It's a hurt that grew, and it changes us, and it drives us. I know people who have chosen a career path based on the hurt rather than based on who they are. It changes us. Hurt is so powerful. Another quick illustration is that I grew up in a home where all the divorces and everything happened, and all of my siblings, I've got 3 siblings, all of my siblings were kicked out of home at one stage or asked to leave, or they left by themselves because they weren't good enough, because they didn't live up to the standard at different ages, 14 through 17. But I wasn't kicked out because I was good, and I served well, and I did right. And you know what I learned in that? The seed of you need to be perfect to be accepted. You need to be perfect to be loved landed on my heart. What does that do to a boy? What does that do to a man? Where I go into situations and this started to grow. I didn't know, but it started to grow, and it changed me to where I need to be perfect. Otherwise, no one's going to accept. Otherwise. And my performance brings love and acceptance. Whew. Eventually, my heart began to look like this. And I don't know if you can tell, there's a house back there. It's a backyard. And this is full of weeds and brambles, and there's a tree that has fallen, and you can't even move the tree because it's just tied in there, and you can't do anything with this piece of dirt. It's just a wasted space, and it can't be what pieces of dirt was meant to be to grow life, to grow something good, because it's just overgrown with brambles and weeds and thorns. This reminds me of our backyard in Atlanta. Not our backyard. We had a nice little backyard, and then there was a fence, and behind the fence was this beautiful little forest. And I used to take the boys when they were young to adventure through there, to go and explore through there, and we would go. But after a few times, we realized we just couldn't do it because it looked like this. And you're kind of hacking and trying to get through all this mess, and you just can't even find the joy of being in a forest because it's so messy. And then I found the worst possible thing was that it wasn't just weeds like this. There were these thorny vines that were hanging down from the trees. And I didn't find a good picture, but these things just were hanging down, and you try to move it out the way, and they'd stab you and prick you, and blood would, and it's just like awful, but that's what it is. And trying to remove that, oh my gosh, was tough. But this is a picture of what my heart was looking like. No wonder I came into marriage going, hey, let's do this thing. I love you, but bah! How's this going to work? Because this is what my heart looked like in certain parts. And again, I don't want to assume of you and presume what your life is like and what your heart looks like. But my guess is that there is a part of every one of our hearts, maybe not all, but there is at least a part of every one of our hearts that looks like this. Because seeds grow, and every time you've been hurt, small or big, every time you've been hurt, They land on a fertile heart and just grow. Whether it's a small little miscommunication that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And when it keeps going and we don't watch it, it grows. And eventually I become the kind of husband I don't want to be, the kind of husband I did not set out to be, the kind of husband who does not love well. Because my heart looks like that. Why do we need to talk about this stuff? Because all of us get hurt. And hurt changes who we are. This is why I love Scripture, the Bible. This is why I love Christianity. Because in Christianity and in Scripture, we find some incredible wisdom on what to do with this stuff. Incredible wisdom. In fact, I want to read one verse, but I want to tell you who wrote this. And it was Solomon, who was known as the wisest person to ever live. I mean, Solomon, when he became king of Israel, God kind of asked him, what do you need from me? And I know that sounds weird, like God spoke to him. I wish he would do that to me, because that would be awesome, right? But it was like this moment where it was like, what do you need? And his prayer, his primary prayer was, God, give me wisdom. And it was granted. He was the wisest person. But not only that, he also spent his life studying people. Studying life. How does meaning come? How does joy, happiness come? And he spent his life studying people. In fact, he wrote down his study of people in the book known as Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. Crazy book to find, wild book, amazing. But it starts off like this. This is what he says. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my mind to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the sun. I want to know how this works. I want to know how people work. I want to know how you find meaning. I want to know how this works. And through all of that study, and through the wisdom that he had, he discovered an incredible principle that I think applies to this area of hurt and our hearts. He says this, above all else, in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, and if the wisest person in the world is saying this, you probably want to listen. And if you've studied everything to find out what's happening, you probably want to listen. What is he going to say? Above all else, Solomon says this, guard your heart. Protect your heart. Guard what's going in here. Watch what's going in here. Guard your heart. Why? For everything you do, your marriage, your relationships, your career, your everything, your values, your character, your decisions, everything you do flows from your heart. And if you don't guard your heart, if you don't protect your heart, it's going to change who you are, and everything you do will be different from how you set out to do it. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That word heart, we think, that's where love is and good feelings and butterflies and all that stuff. That's not at all what the word heart in Hebrew meant, and that's the language that Solomon wrote this in. It's such a robust word. It defines who we are. Here's what the word heart means from one of the Hebrew dictionaries. It's our inner part, our soul, our mind, our knowledge, thinking, reflection, our memory, our inclination, our resolution, our will, our conscience, our character. This is all wrapped up in that word heart. It's a seat of our appetites, the seat of our emotions and passions, and it's the seat of our courage. In other words, it's who we are. And Solomon says, please listen. We live in a world that's broken, where seeds are thrown at us the whole time. Guard your heart. Guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. Above all else, he says, guard your heart. Everything you do flows from it. So where does that lead? It leads to a very important question, I think. How do I guard my heart? So I get it, okay, the hurt happens and it changes me and it has the potential to change me. I don't really want to admit it yet, and I'm still going to distract myself, and I don't really want to talk about this, but okay. I see how it can change me, and I see how all hurt has the potential to change me. So how do I guard my heart? When I spoke about that seed aspect earlier this year, I spoke about this, and then I said, hey, here's one way. When the seeds fall during the day, every day, this is what I said at the end. At the end of each day, sweep the bad seeds away. At the end of each day, recognize that seeds are falling. And at the end of the day, seeds of anger, bitterness, whatever it is, rejection, all that stuff, just sweep them away. And I went off stage and I was like, wow, yeah, that's an important message and everything. And someone came up to me and said, man, that was an important idea. And yes, we have to do this. But I don't know if I got distracted and didn't hear you say how we do that. And I was like, well, I didn't. So that's what the series is about. How do we sweep the bad seeds away? How do we guard our hearts? And not just the seeds that are falling, because here's the reality. Every single day, seeds are falling on our hearts. Every single day. So we have to be watching, guard our hearts, sweep those bad seeds away. But the reality is, throughout our life, seeds have fallen on our hearts, just like with me. And they've impacted how we live, who we are. Everything we do flows from it. They've impacted our hearts, how we love, how we relate, how we parent, how we do marriage, how we even relate to God, all the stuff, how we are, how we think, all the stuff has been impacted. So what do we do with that? How do we go into our hearts and get rid of this? How? How do we do that? That's what the series is about, because the reality is we don't want our hearts to look like this, right? Wouldn't you much rather have your heart looking like this? I would. And maybe you're a guy, you're like, I don't like tulips. Then let me give you another picture. How about this? A life-giving farm where there's this piece of dirt and all the potential in it is being used. And it feeds people and brings life. One more picture. Wouldn't you like your heart to look something like this? Where it's not only beautiful, but it's helpful. It's healthy. That's what we want. When you're a kid, you dream of who I'm going to be, freedom, where I'm at. It's going to be beautiful. This is how I want to do it. This is how I want to relate. This is how I want to raise my kids. This is how I want to be married. This is how I want to do my career. And then we get into it, and those seeds come in and start to get in there. How do we heal the hurt that has changed us? That's what the series is about. And if you want to know how, you have to come back next week. Because there's so much, and I'm learning from a bunch of people, and I've kind of started this journey, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because I have kind of walked through some of this. And I'm telling you, my heart looked like this. That picture of the mess, my heart looked like this. And it was messing up the relationships. It nearly destroyed my marriage. But through this journey, I've gotten to the place where I've cleared away a bunch of that. And there's some nice tulips and sunflowers and whatever else growing. And I'm going, yes, yes, that's who I want to be. Before we end, though, there's something that I have to say, and that's this. And after all of that, this feels weird to say, but this series is not really going to help. Here's why I say this. Because we live in a world that wants quick fixes, right? So one series is not going to come in and go, poof, my heart is beautiful, there's tulips growing everywhere, this is amazing. The content, I just don't know enough. I don't know your story. There's not enough information. There's not enough time. There's not enough help. I mean, this is not really going to help. So my goal is not that we all walk out with perfectly clean hearts, with no thorns and no weeds and no mess, and all of us look great. That's not my goal. My goal is simply this, to invite you to start a journey, because there's no quick fix. And through counseling, my story, through years, I've seen this begin to change. And it's been amazing, but it takes a while. But it's no better time than now to start the journey. And so my hope is that we'll at least look into this. And this is true for all of us. If you're a Christian or not a Christian, this is true for all of us. At least look to see what's in there and begin a journey. And then the last thing I want to say is this, and this is so important. Actually, I have a question for you. This piece of dirt right over here, do you think it can get rid of the weeds by itself? Dumb question, I know, but go with me. Dirt, a piece of dirt can't pull its own weeds out. A piece of dirt can't go and pops out. A piece of dirt can't do that. A piece of dirt can't clear the weeds that are constantly falling on its own self. A piece of dirt can't plant beautiful flowers and life-giving food. A piece of dirt cannot do that. In fact, let me ask you, what's the difference between this messy, gross piece of dirt and this beautiful farm? What's the difference? Because it's the same. It's a piece of dirt, right? What's the difference? I think the main difference, other than what's there, the reason there's a difference is because this piece of dirt did not have a farmer, and this piece of dirt did. This piece of dirt did not have a gardener to care for it, to pull those weeds, to clean it up, to take some time to till the ground, to fertilize. This piece did. Look at the difference. The point is this: you and I are a piece of dirt. Sorry. In fact, Christianity teaches that. We're a piece of dirt. But you know how God sees this piece of dirt and that piece of dirt? As the most powerful thing, the most beautiful thing, the most life-giving thing. Because did you know that if we didn't have a bunch of pieces of dirt on this planet, life wouldn't be possible. Plants couldn't grow, food couldn't be there, air wouldn't be available. We would all die if there wasn't the life-giving part of what dirt is. We would die, we would not live. So when God looks at you, he sees a piece of dirt, but he sees the piece of dirt that is possible, is able to produce that. But the reality is, you, me, we in this broken, messed up world with the thorns and the thistles and the mess and the brambles and the weeds and the seeds that fall in our hearts all the time, this is where we head naturally. This is what happens naturally. We know that is true in our gardens because we live in Florida and there's just stuff that grows all the time. We know that's true, but the difference between this and this is a gardener. So in fact, in this series, although I know it's going to be inadequate and my knowledge is inadequate and I don't know how much it can help, what I do know can help is not just to invite you on a journey, but to introduce you to a gardener. Because that gardener loves you so much and sees you for who you were meant to be, better than you even thought. And he was willing to send his son to die for you, to die for the mess that is created in you, and to die for the mess that you've added to and all the junk in there. He has sent a gardener. So this series, my hope is to ask you, to invite you to open the gate to your garden, to your piece of dirt, and invite the gardener in, because I'm telling you that will help. That's what changed me. That's what has brought me from a place where I still have some of this, and my wife feels it. But there's more of this than there ever has been, because a gardener has come in and said, I want to help. So that's what the series is about. How to heal when you've been hurt. And the primary way is to invite the gardener in, because he can weed, he can till, he can fertilize, he can help, and he can plant beautiful, life-giving seeds. So won't you go on this journey with me, and won't you consider inviting the gardener into parts of our hearts that we may never have done before. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you. God, I'm so grateful that I met the gardener. I'm so grateful that all the weeds and mess in my own heart that was impacting who I was, and still there's parts still today. But I'm so grateful that there's a gardener who helps me sweep those seeds away, who helps me cut those terrible vines, who helps me pull up the roots of things in my heart that have changed me. God, thank you for a gardener who has literally taken the hurt and actually brought beauty out of it somehow. And God, my prayer is, as we go through this series, that we will be honest with ourselves. We won't walk out of here and distract ourselves too much that we're not willing to talk about this, so that you can begin to pull out the mess and plant beauty. God, I'm grateful. Help us as we walk through it. In Jesus' name, amen.